All right, I've turned on the recording, so we might as well get started. The number seems to have stabilized. We may pick up a couple more as we go, but thanks everyone for coming out to this morning's webinar. This is sort of the third, I think, in the series of weekly ones we've been doing. Obviously, we skipped last week for Good Friday, but thank you for coming out. So my intent today is to sort of overview the changes we made to the pathways to licensure last year. When I first started with AALA, the first conversations I had with people were about their frustrations with the mentorship processes and the lack of clarity around those processes. So we've been working off and on repairing and deploying a new product for quite a while. And we finally launched this product in June to replace the mentorship process, which became the pre-internship process. And so I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to walk you some of the internship pieces just to make sure everyone understands and is on the same page. And then we'll talk about the jury and advising and supervising and all the rules related to that. So before we get started, I'm going to start with a quick poll just to try to get a sense of why people are here today. So you should all have had a little thing pop up in the window, which will allow you to vote. Almost everyone's had a chance. One more, there we go. So it looks like we have some folks, some participants in these programs, some general interest, and we also have an LA or two who are already supervising. So I'm just going to end that and share it. Obviously, lots of general interest. It's not a big group today, but like I say, a lot of our members are watching these post-event as well. So good. Just gonna get that out of my way. There we go. All right, so as I say, this process was launched in June of 2019 after sort of about a year of work by the registration committee and review by the board on several occasions. It resulted in two sort of functional areas that we look at through the registration procedures. Those that are from an accredited program and those who are not. Now, the not group is a pretty wide-ranging array of people that can interact with us, and we allowed for, in keeping with some of the government mandates right now, the opportunity for that to happen a lot of ways. And that was by design and by intention, with intention. And we're going to talk about some of the different pathways that we identified, and others that may crop up will fit within this program that we may not have anticipated. So obviously, accredited degree holders didn't have any significant changes in this processes. What we did do is we clarified for advisors and supervisors expectations. We had a lot of challenge with advisors, supervisors understanding their role and function, some not taking it seriously enough, some taking it too seriously, and setting standards which were unachievable for interns, especially. Hello, change. There we go. So the mentorship process in its old name no longer exists. We retired that process. The final candidate completed and transitioned to internship about 3 months ago, actually. In the entire history of this program, it's important to note that there had been maybe 12 or 13 people apply for it over a period of a decade. And of that group, 3 managed to actually successfully start and finish. 1 started and did not finish. And most of them tended to find it so complicated is maybe the best word, that they weren't able to understand how to navigate the process and move forward in it, which is why most that expressed interest in the process never actually started it. And so when we looked at the program, we really eliminated the name from a marketing perspective, just because it had so much negative stigma attached to it. So now we use we have a pre-internship process, and you'll see it dovetails directly through that. We establish competency evaluation, portfolios, and minimum experience. So how does this really work? One of the things that we've been endeavoring to do, and I don't know how legible this is going to be for you folks, but is we tried to create some infographics, and these are a work in progress, but part of the new Fair Registration Practices Act mandate by the government, we're working really hard to identify opportunities to increase clarity and transparency of all of our processes. And so we've been working towards these sort of graphical representations of the process. This isn't actually the final version of this, but it's the only one that fits in this space of page. But you'll see there's about 10 steps in this process, keeping in mind that this includes the 5 steps from the internship process as well. So initial application, all applicants seeking to enter now as associate members in what we call Class R, which is the regular pre-process. Everyone who applies at that stage gives us a CV and a transcript or proof of graduation. That's the baseline. That allows me to review where they're at and figure out where do they stream from here. Obviously, if they are a accredited degree holder, they stream into internship. If they're not an accredited degree holder, we then evaluate whether or not they're an appropriate candidate for the pre-internship process or if they need to go elsewhere. If they don't have so basically what happens is if they don't have an accredited degree, but they have 2 years of industry-related experience, then we would move them into pre-internship. If they do not have that 2 years, we would put them as an affiliate because they have that interest in industry. We would encourage them to go off and get that 2 years of experience and then reapply for pre-internship once they've achieved that. And related experience, it does have to be directly related to industry, but it's a pretty wide bar of what we might accept. We've envisioned potentially looking at things like someone who maybe has involved in landscape trades or horticulture or greenhouses, something where they have a real sense of landscape. But obviously the next step is going to be employment with a firm that's going to help them to progress. So it's a pretty high bar to enter this program, that they have to have some sense of what they're getting into. So again, if they're streamed into the pre-internship process, they would then nominate an advisor and a supervisor. And they would also, so that goes to the committee chair and the registrar to approve, unless it's someone that's already supporting a candidate. So for example, I can't think of anyone there's a few on the call actually who are supervisor advisors. If you're already doing that, I don't reapprove you each time. I know who's already on the list, so you're automatically approved if you're an existing person. Supervisors are generally always approved, provided that they meet the minimum criteria. And we do have systems in place to make special exceptions. Say, for example, we've got a couple candidates that are working in less urban centers like Lethbridge, where there isn't an LA available to directly supervise. So their supervisor is at one of the other firm offices and takes on some additional work to support those candidates. And so again, once they have an approved advisor, they go through a competency mapping tool. It takes about 40 hours for the candidate and supervisor to go through the process, and it has them delineate all of their education and experience and how it relates to the mapped competencies that we're interested in for full licensure. It's to give the committee a baseline of what are we getting. If this is someone who's new entrant that has no context, it's usually a pretty bare scape. But often where this becomes important is people that maybe are international applicants that are coming in with tough to determine educational criteria, different experiences, and it allows them to really map up and paint a picture of the context of their relevant experience. And they also then go through and provide their first portfolio. And these 2 documents become the baseline of their entire progression through to final licensure. They resubmit that at each transition point. So they will give it to us initially, they will resubmit those when they apply to move from pre-internship to internship, and they have to bring them back and do them again so the jury also sees them, so they are able to see that progression over time. Once they've submitted those 2 documents, the registration committee reviews the degree relevance, the CV, the tools, the portfolio, and that leads them to a number of hours of supervised professional practice. So the new program core requirement is they can work. They're working, they're gaining experience as they go, and this is where we end up with that. So depending on the related degree or diploma, they may get assigned up to 14,400 hours, which is about 8 years of practice. The lowest we've seen is 3,600 hours, and that's a candidate that had about 14 years. They were a NAIT graduate that had been working in industry for 14 years. They got basically knocked right down to 3,600, and I think in hindsight the committee probably would have even cut that further. But first round, no one got less than 3,600 hours. We've got a couple doing 72 right now, and really again, yanking and banking, developing their confidence, adding to their portfolio throughout the process. And then formal education. So under the old mentorship process, there was a lot of emphasis placed on going out and getting formal education, but it was always very nebulous in terms of how that was going to be achieved and managed. So in the new process, they do have the ability to take formal educational programs, and they do achieve an hour credit for those. So when a pre-intern does a academic course at a university, they complete that course, they submit a form with their advisor's support that will identify what did they take, what did they learn, and what is the hour equivalence to that. And then we apply those hours against their total hour requirements, and they have the opportunity to delineate where they feel that course match their competency needs. In most cases, what that's probably going to be is a couple hundred hours, depending on what it is. Maybe they took a plant analysis course, and that's going to apply to that section of their competence. So once their hours are finished, they'll meet again with their advisor, supervisor to update their resume, their competency tool, and their portfolio. We will know that their hours are complete because the digital system takes care of that for us. And so assuming the advisor is on board, the advisor would endorse them to proceed to internship, and the committee would re-review. If they're approved, they're automatically re-enrolled as an internship and go through the traditional internship process. Questions about pre-internship before I move on to remember, you can use the participant list to put your hand up. You can type a question into the Q&A. You can put a question in the chat window. I must be very, very good at this because I'm getting no questions. All right, so then internship really hasn't had any major changes as long as I've been here, other than some clarification around consistent use of language. So again, moving towards infographics that talk really about this process. This is someone with an accredited degree or who has completed pre-internship. They apply to be an intern, they nominate their team, they go through the process. So again, CV, resume, and official transcript, they move into internship. They're going to nominate an advisor supervisor. They're going to give us 5 digits of their SIN, which we use to give them access to the CLARB system so that they can then work on their LAREs. And they go through the process. The process, as I say, largely has not changed. 3,600 hours of supervised professional practice, completion of the 4 LAREs, and then within the 3,600 hours of supervised professional practice, they're broken out into these, 7 categories: design development, detailed design, contract document, contract admin, office practice, and professional activity. And these are consistent across a number of areas. So the supervised professional practice hours are aligned with the portfolio checklist. They're aligned with the competency hours that are developed using the competency tool. You'll see these consistent terms flow through, and under each of these 7 competencies, there's actually anywhere from 3 to 13 sub-competencies where they're required to accumulate hours. One of the common things that does happen in this process is there's a reality that everyone's going to be a little higher, a little low. So in some cases, they may have, maybe their common deficiency is going to be master planning, because not all firms do much of that. But they'll have excess hours in other areas, and as long as it's within reasonable bounds, committee will generally allow a candidate to proceed. Obviously, if they're significantly deficient, that'll be a problem. My poor dogs this morning, I don't know what's going on out front. All right, so once they've completed those hours, they've done their 4 LAREs successfully, and they've got their advisor's recommendation, they would then, they'll reapply to go forward and do their jurisprudence. At that point, the committee will then re-review, and presuming everything's in order, which it typically is by this point, we'll progress them on to jury. Questions about internship? Seeing none. So then we have the jury interview, which is the important thing to understand about jurisprudence, and you're going to see this language used very consistently now, is within legislation, this interview is specific to ensuring that a candidate meets the competency we expect in Alberta. And it's very deliberately called this now throughout all the process, because it's important that when we deal with interprovincial reciprocity, for example, the only thing we can test during reciprocity from BC and Ontario is their Alberta-based knowledge. Everything else is sort of not considered allowed under legislation. So that's why you'll see this jurisprudence has a legal connotation that allows us within this process to stay in safe zone. So again, candidate produces a presentation, usually 30, but it's often 40, 45 minutes, plus the questioning from the committee. Their portfolio presentation at this point is intended to map against those same competencies we showed earlier. Then they go through and talk about all the work they've done in all these different areas. It's usually, one of the big things is it's important that they keep it electronic. Anything that I'm given copy of in hard copy, I have to keep for 5 to 7 years. So we try to keep it all electronic. And again, jurisprudence tests Alberta-based knowledge. So our requirements, PORA, LAR, our bylaws, history, code of ethics, and this is an area where the committee is looking towards developing some more robust rigor to maintain this process validity. So there's going to be some work. It was supposed to happen around June. It'll probably happen in the fall now. At the end of the jury examination, there's a determination of the outcome. In actually every case but one that I have seen since I've been here, approval is granted. Generally speaking, that's because we've done the rigor in advance. If something gets to the last step and we find there's a problem, it's atypical. We did have one deferral, but they represented the same content 6 months later, and it was fine. So it was more of a blip. In the event of a deferral, we are required by law to provide concrete direction in terms of what they need to do before they come back. And that's the same at every point. Any point we defer a candidate from progressing where they've met the criteria, we're required to give them concrete, definitive, this is what you need to do, and then you need to come back. Anything that is not definitive and concrete puts us in a case of legislative danger. Basically, we could be sued because we're restraining this person's ability to earn an income, to hold their title, to have access to employment. So if we were sued, we need to have the ability to say, this is the concrete deficiencies this candidate had, this is the direction they were given, and they failed to then comply. If we say, well, they're just not ready, well, that's not defensible. We have to have concrete examples of what they need to do, and that happens at every stage. And it's one of the toughest things for the advisors to be in a position of is, what specific thing do they need to do that they haven't done? If we can't tell them that, generally speaking, the committee, both the Registration Oversight Committee and the board, will delineate. If we can't communicate a concrete need or behavior or activity, they will overrule and they will allow the candidate to proceed. Yeah. Okay, and so again, portfolio checklist. This follows exactly to the supervised professional practice, but you'll see the subcategories are here. Things like inventory and analysis, planning, report writing, cost estimating, presentation techniques, drainage and grading, layouts, reports and reporting, contractor selection, RFP, bid package, all of that comes through, professional fees and participation in the professional associations. One of the things the board has asked that will be coming through in the next round of change that we're going to review probably in May will be to add additional rigor to the requirements for engagement in professional association and volunteering. The board has asked that interns be mandated to have a more active participation role. So attending social functions will no longer be good enough. They'll have to actually sit on a committee or work on a project. And we're just working out the logistics of what that's going to mean. So we'll see, you'll find out more about that probably in June, July. Questions about jury process, actually? Seeing none. These are very, very agreeable this morning. Supervisor advisors are sort of the overall linchpin to making this work. One of the things we've changed is all supervisors will now seal a document that they understand their expectations. And to me, the most important statement in there is that they understand that their job is to say this person's ready to move forward. Keeping in mind that if the answer is they're not ready, what are those quantifiable, specific things that that candidate needs to do so they can get to the point where they're ready? And that's a really essential part of this equation, because again, the goal of licensure is base competence. It is not the ability to go off and run their own firm on the first day. The goal is that they have a base level competence to be a functional professional and protect the health, safety, wellness of the public. So advisor supervisor, again, two specific functions here. We prefer, wherever possible, to have a landscape architect in Alberta with 5 or more years of licensure. We make some variations for Manitoba now because their process is close to ours, so we give a little bit of extra. Again, BC, Ontario folks, it works as well, although again, our preference is always to keep it all within the province. Again, the advisor's role is to ensure that candidate is making progress towards full competency. The supervisor's job is to be able to attest that candidate their timesheets are accurate against their hours logs, because there's no way for the advisor to know that. The supervisor should be able to. And the other job that the supervisor is essential to is ensuring that the candidate gets a wide array of project exposures. The advisor also has a role in that in terms of opening doors or allowing a candidate to get into another firm to maybe observe. But it's primarily the supervisor's job to ensure that diversity of work is made available to the candidate. And again, the other thing is advisor may not under any circumstances be within the firm. Supervisor absolutely is expected to be within the firm. We try to avoid that employment relationship with the advisors. Now, if there were an unusual case where that was not feasible for some reason, we may look at extenuating circumstances, but typically not. Again, general accountability, advisors and supervisors are expected to review and approve professional practice logs within 10 days. We're probably going to extend that to 15 days. Communicate problems or concerns in a timely manner. Meet with the candidate regularly to review their progress and to keep us informed of any concerns or problems that arise. Additional accountability for the advisor is to review candidate work at least quarterly, provide guidance on any tools or portfolios, review academic courses for pre-interns, work with the candidate to identify those areas of weakness and strategies to overcome them, and work with the supervisor or other LAs to help them gain access to areas of work that they maybe don't currently have access to within their own home firm. And then the supervisor, again, making sure that work product and those timesheets are accurately reflected in the supervised professional practice, oversee that daily work, and again, work with other LAs or firms to help the candidate access projects or work types that they're not currently getting within the firm so they come out well-rounded. Questions? That's the end. We're fast today. Remember, you can put your hand up, you can chat the question, you can put the Q&A, use the Q&A box. All right. Well, if there's no questions, I want to thank everyone for hanging in there and coming through the presentation. Oh, Stefan asked, how many people in the jury? Right now, the Calgary jury has 5 folks on it, keeping in mind that currently the chair of the registration committee, the registrar, and the board member responsible for regulation are all have the ability to sit on that group, but don't typically. So that's 3 additional. So that would be 8 with the optionals. In the north, it is I want to say we have 7 with the optionals. and we do a call from time to time. Most of the jury members are very senior practitioners. They're, people that have huge experience, and we brought some new people in the last year to start to rebuild that confidence, because some of these folks that have sat jury for many, many years are also getting pretty close to retirement, and they're going to want to stop sitting on at some point. Great question. And Fiona asked, jury prep sessions. It's a good question. No one's ever asked for one, actually, Fiona. So no, not currently, but there's no reason we couldn't have. I can tell you that the biggest consistent feedback, I would say that if we're going to do anything to start with, we're going to put together a Toastmasters style event where interns that are getting close to jury can get some presentation practice. I can tell you, having sat through all the juries for the past 3 years, there's a wide array of presentation skill within the intern population. Some of the interns are clearly getting lots of face time and are very comfortable getting up and presenting on work. Other interns are really, really weak in that area and can definitely use some prody in that section. The presentation itself is pretty straightforward, but I definitely will make a note that we should look to do some prep sessions or get some of the recent folks at jury to sort of talk about their experience at least. Other questions? Good questions so far. Going once. Going twice. All right. If you think of other questions that you wish you'd ask, please don't hesitate to zap me off an email. If you have feedback about the presentation today, things you wish I'd included, things that maybe weren't clear, definitely zap me off an email. I'd love to get some feedback. I do this about once a year, and if there's some gaps, I'll add it into the next round. But other than that, everyone have a great Friday. Stay safe wherever you're working from. There was a survey went out today that I would appreciate if you could all fill in. But other than that, have a great day.